My friends, what I am about to share may shake you, because it is not about politics. It is not about fame. It is not even about one man. It is about a revelation of God. I was in prayer, weighed down by the heaviness of this age, the lies, the anger, the confusion that fills our world. And then God opened my eyes. He showed me something about Charlie Kirk's will, not just his will, but the battle of wills. My friends, listen closely, because what I am about to say is not ordinary. It is not the product of imagination. It is not a dream from a restless night. It is something that was shown to me in prayer, in a moment when my spirit was heavy. The world is filled with noise, arguments, distractions, and battles. Yet in the stillness of God, I was shown something that struck me to the core. It was not about politics, not about platforms, not about the fleeting voices of men. It was something deeper. It was about a will, a man's will, a destiny pressed against the forces of light and darkness. And God revealed it in connection with Charlie Kirk. But understand this, the revelation was not about one man alone. God often shows us through symbols, through signs, through a single life, what He wants to say to an entire generation. And in this moment, Charlie's will became like a mirror, reflecting the struggle that every one of us carries. A struggle between the will of the flesh and the will of God, between surrendering to the weight of negativity or rising with courage into the purpose for which we were born. I felt the weight of it, a heaviness like a chain pulling at the soul. God showed me that when a person begins to surrender their will to the whispers of despair, when they let the storms of doubt dictate their steps, when fear and bitterness begin to guide their choices, that person may still look alive on the outside, but within, their spirit has begun to die. Their voice is muted, their strength is drained, their vision is clouded. And this is the tragedy of so many in our time. But then came the shock, because just as the darkness was heavy, I was shown the light of surrender. Not surrender to despair, but surrender to God. And the difference was like night and day. A man who yields his will to the negative becomes a prisoner. But a man who yields his will to God becomes unstoppable. His words carry weight. His spirit shines with authority. His presence itself testifies to something greater. And God was saying, this is the battle. This is the revelation. The will of a man is not a small thing. It can align with destruction, or it can align with destiny. When I saw this, I realized something about myself and about you. Every negative feeling you've ever had, every doubt, every voice that told you you're not enough, every whisper that said you've already failed, that you'll never make it, that the world is against you, those feelings are not the truth. They are the storm. They are the shadow. And the shadow only has power if you believe it. I felt God pressing this into my spirit. The greatest war you will ever fight is not out there in the world, not against flesh and blood, but within your own will. It is in the moment when you decide whether to surrender to despair or to rise in faith. It is in the moment when the negative thought comes and you either let it take root or you cast it down and choose to believe what God has said about you. This was the revelation, that the will of a man surrendered to negativity is like a house with broken walls. It cannot stand when the storm comes. But the will surrendered to God is like a fortress, immovable, unshakable. And God does not give such visions for nothing. He gives them as warnings and as calls to action. My friends, I tell you this with all my heart. If you are listening to me now, this is not about Charlie Kirk alone. This is about you. God is putting His finger on your will, on your choices, on the way you respond to the storms around you. You cannot afford to surrender to bitterness. You cannot afford to drown in fear. You cannot afford to waste your will on despair. For the time is too short, the call too urgent, the stakes too high. I felt God saying, tell them their will is not powerless. Tell them they were born with purpose. Tell them that though the negative will rise like waves, my truth is greater, my power is stronger, my spirit is with them. Tell them they must not bow to the storm. So I stand before you with trembling, not in my strength but in His, declaring this. What God showed me is meant to shock you, to awaken you, because it is not about one man's will. It is about yours. And the question is burning in the air even now. Which way will you bend? To the lies of the enemy or to the truth of the living God? To despair or to destiny? The revelation is this: the will of man can be the most dangerous weapon or the greatest instrument of heaven. The choice belongs to you. And if you choose rightly, if you align your will with His, then no chain can hold you, no storm can drown you, no enemy can silence you. This is what He showed me, and this is what I pass on to you. The struggle with negativity is one of the greatest battles of our lives, and most people don't even recognize it for what it is. They think it's just feelings, passing thoughts, moods that will fade away. But in truth, it is far deeper. It is spiritual. It is the enemy whispering lies into the human soul, trying to convince you to abandon your purpose, to surrender your hope, to give up your destiny. When I prayed and sought God, I felt Him showing me that the true battlefield is not always in the streets or in the courts or in the world of politics, but inside the human heart, inside you, inside me. Negativity doesn't come with a trumpet blast. It comes quietly, like a shadow slipping through a crack in the door. It speaks softly. You can't do it. You're not strong enough. No one believes in you. You will fail just like last time. And if you are not watchful, you begin to agree. You begin to let those words shape you. Suddenly, your shoulders feel heavier, your steps slower, your vision dimmer. You start living as though you are already defeated, even when God has called you to victory. I remember the heaviness that pressed on me when this was revealed. It was as though I could feel the weight that countless souls carry every single day. Some wake up already weary, already filled with dread, because the voice of negativity has followed them through the night. Some look at their past and see only mistakes, failures, broken pieces, and they think that is all they will ever be. Some lie chained by fear, fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of not being enough. These are not just emotions. They are weapons. And if they take hold, they can choke out life itself. But God showed me something else. He showed me how many people live their lives fighting the wrong battle. They wrestle against others. They pour out anger on those around them. They blame circumstances. Yet the real fight is inside. The real fight is the decision of the will to either let negativity rule or to rise above it by faith. And I felt the weight of sorrow because so many choose the wrong side without even realizing it. They let bitterness harden their hearts. They let jealousy poison their souls. They let hopelessness drown their dreams. And in doing so, they surrender their will to the very thing that seeks to destroy them. I must tell you, this is not just a struggle for some. It is the struggle for all. None of us are beyond it. Even the strongest voices, even those who seem fearless, even those who stand on stages and speak with fire, they too know what it is to be hit with waves of negativity. The question is not whether it will come. The question is, what will you do when it does? I felt God's Spirit saying, do not despise the struggle, for it is in the struggle that your true allegiance is revealed. When the negative thoughts come, you will either bow to them or you will stand against them. And standing is not easy. It takes faith. It takes remembering that God's word is higher than your feelings. It takes declaring truth, even when everything in you feels broken. But hear me, when you resist the negative, when you refuse to surrender your will to despair, you are not just surviving, you are growing stronger. This is the paradox. The presence of negativity does not mean you are failing. It means you are in the fight. And the fight itself can forge your spirit into something unshakable if you cling to God. But if you let the darkness define you, then you are already defeated before you take a single step. I felt this revelation burning in me. Negativity is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is designed to break you down. It is designed to silence your voice. It is designed to keep you from ever stepping into the purpose that God has placed on your life. That is why it feels so heavy. That is why it presses so hard. Because if you ever break free, if you ever choose faith over fear, hope over despair, courage over doubt, you will become unstoppable. And the enemy knows it. So hear me, my friend. If you are weary, if you are burdened, if you are drowning in negative thoughts, you are not alone. The struggle is real, but it is not the end. You are not destined to live under the weight of that darkness. You are destined to overcome. The same God who raised the dead, who calmed the storm, who turned weakness into strength, is the God who can lift you above every negative voice. But you must choose. You must align your will with His truth. You must say, even through tears, even through trembling, I will not surrender to despair. I will not bow to fear. I choose to believe. The struggle with negativity is fierce, but it is also the doorway. For once you learn to stand in that place, once you learn to resist, once you learn to anchor yourself in God's truth, you will never be the same again. You will walk lighter, stronger, freer. And every time the negative voice comes, it will remind you not of defeat, but of how far you have risen and how powerful your God truly is. That is the battle. That is the revelation. And that is the call to you right now. The struggle with negativity is not something distant, not something abstract, not something that belongs only to the broken or the weak. It is the silent war every soul faces, the war that no one else may ever see. Outwardly, you may look strong, you may smile, you may carry on with your duties, But inside, the battle can rage like a storm that never seems to end. It is the heaviness that comes when you least expect it, the voice that tells you you are not enough, the shadow that falls over your joy and tries to convince you that your future will be no brighter than your past. And I must tell you, this struggle is real and it is fierce. When God showed me the weight of this battle, I felt it deeply in my own spirit. I could sense the ache of people carrying burdens too heavy for them, walking through life with invisible chains around their hearts. Negativity does not shout, it whispers. It does not strike you all at once. It seeps in like water through cracks until you are soaked and you didn't even notice when it began. It disguises itself as truth, but it is always a lie. It says, "You failed before, so you will fail again." It says, "No one cares for you, no one sees you, no one will ever understand." It says, "Your best days are behind you, your strength is gone, your hope is empty." These whispers are not harmless thoughts. They are arrows aimed at your will, designed to pierce and weaken your spirit until you surrender. And yet, even in the heaviness, there was light, because God revealed to me that the presence of negativity does not mean you are forsaken. It means you are in the fight, and every fight reveals the truth of where you stand. Negativity tries to convince you that it defines who you are, but it cannot. It has no power except the power you give it. And though it is relentless, though it feels suffocating, you have a choice. In every moment, you are either feeding the lie or feeding the truth. I have felt it myself, the temptation to give in, the pull to believe the dark whispers more than the promises of God. And maybe you have too. Maybe there are days when the weight of everything in your life makes it easier to listen to despair than to hope. Maybe you wake up, and before you even take your first breath of the morning, the shadow of negativity is already there, telling you it's not worth it, telling you you don't matter. My friend, that is the struggle. And it is not small. It is the very place where destinies are won or lost. But here is what was made clear to me. Every negative feeling that presses against you is not a sign that you are weak, but that you are human and that you are being tested. And a test is not meant to destroy you. A test is meant to reveal what is inside of you. If you surrender, the negativity becomes your master. If you resist, it becomes the very tool that strengthens you. For what muscle grows without resistance? What warrior becomes strong without battle? So it is with the soul. This is why you cannot allow negativity to write your story. You cannot let it be the voice that dictates your choices. Because if you do, you are surrendering your will to something that was never meant to hold it. You were created to rise, not to sink. You were created to carry light, not to live in shadow. And yes, the struggle is real. Yes, the nights are long. Yes, the tears are heavy. But even heavier is the weight of a destiny lost because you bowed to the voice of despair. And yet, even now, the invitation remains. God does not leave you to fight alone. In every moment you feel crushed, He is near. In every moment you want to give up, His hand is reaching. The struggle with negativity will not vanish overnight. It may come again and again. But each time it comes, you have the chance to choose again, to say again, I will not bow. I will not surrender. I will not believe the lie. And every time you do, something in you grows stronger, something in you becomes more unshakable, something in you reflects the strength of the one who called you. So the struggle is not your defeat. It is your proving ground. It is the furnace that forges you. And though it feels unbearable at times, remember this: the storm may roar, but it cannot drown the one whose anchor is set in truth. The shadows may fall, but they cannot remain when the light breaks through. The lies may whisper, but they cannot silence the one who chooses to believe God above all else. That is the struggle. That is the war. And it is in that very war that your destiny will be revealed. When I speak of the divine perspective, I do not mean a theory, an idea, or a nice thought to make us feel better in dark times. I mean the very eyes of God upon our lives, the way He sees when all we can feel is confusion, when all we can sense is the storm. We look at our lives and we see pieces scattered. We see struggles that make no sense. We see the negativity that rises up like a flood, and we think that is all there is. But God looks at the same picture and sees something entirely different. Where we see failure, He sees the foundation of a greater strength. Where we see loss, He sees the soil in which something new can grow. Where we see despair, He sees the opportunity for redemption to break forth. It is hard for us to grasp this because our vision is limited. We look through the lens of pain, and pain narrows the view. We see only the hurt, only the injustice, only the betrayal. And when negativity surrounds us, it is as though the sky itself is closed and the light is gone. But from heaven's perspective, the story is not over. What we call an ending, God calls the beginning of something greater. What we think is hopeless, He calls the place where His power will be revealed. I felt this so strongly as I prayed over the revelation of the will. God was saying to me, you see only the struggle, but I see the victory that is possible if the will is surrendered to me. You see only the weight of negativity, but I see the strength that will rise when you refuse to bow to it. You see only the present pain, but I see the eternal glory that can come from it. And that is the divine perspective. It is not that God denies our pain. It is not that He ignores our wounds. It is that He sees beyond them. He sees what we cannot yet see, and He calls us to trust Him when everything in us screams to give up. I think of those who feel trapped in their struggles. They look around and say, why me? Why this? Why now? They see only the chains. But from the divine perspective, even the chains can become the very thing that reveals freedom. Even the prison can become the place of the greatest song. Even the fire can become the furnace where the gold is refined. What looks like destruction in human eyes can look like preparation in the eyes of God. And this is why negativity is such a liar. Because it tells you the story is over, that the darkness is permanent, that your life is broken beyond repair. But God's perspective says the opposite. It says the story is still being written. It says the light has not been extinguished. It says the brokenness is not the end, but the canvas on which His glory can shine. This is why He calls us to lift our eyes, to shift our perspective, to see as He sees. It is not easy. When you are weighed down with fear, when the tears will not stop, when the silence feels unbearable, it is almost impossible to believe that God sees anything beyond your pain. Yet that is where faith begins. Faith is not denying the storm. Faith is believing there is something greater than the storm. Faith is daring to believe that the same God who brought light into the darkness at the beginning of creation can bring light into the darkness of your heart right now. And when you begin to see with his perspective, something happens inside you. The negativity loses its grip. The whispers of despair grow weaker because you start to realize this pain does not define me. This failure does not end me. This moment is not all there is. You start to see your life as part of a larger story, one authored by the very hand of God. And when you see it that way, you gain courage to keep going even when you don't understand. This is the shock of the divine perspective, that what seems senseless to us can carry divine purpose, that what feels like loss can be gain, that what seems like silence can be preparation. And if you will trust him, if you will surrender your will, if you will refuse to let negativity rule you, you will one day look back and see that he was weaving a story greater than you could have ever imagined. So I say to you, my friend, lift your eyes. Do not be blinded by the storm. Do not let the lies of negativity tell you that this is the end. There is more, far more than you can see. God is still at work. His perspective is higher, his ways deeper, his vision clearer. And when you align your heart to that perspective, you will find strength, peace, and hope that nothing in this world can take away. That is the divine perspective, and it is the perspective you are being called to live by now. The call to courage is not an easy call. It is not gentle. It is not soft. It does not come wrapped in comfort. It comes when everything in you feels weak, when your knees shake, when your heart is heavy, when your mind is filled with doubt. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to stand, even when fear is pressing against you with all its weight. And this is what God pressed into me. When the will surrenders to him, it is not merely about survival. It is about rising. Rising when others bow. Rising when everything says, stay down. Rising when negativity whispers, you cannot. And answering with faith, but God can. Courage is the act of choosing to walk into the fire, knowing it can burn, but trusting that it will not consume you. Courage is the choice to speak truth when lies are louder. Courage is the step forward when everything in you says to retreat. And what God showed me is this: the world is not only starving for truth, it is starving for people who will be courageous enough to live it. Because truth without courage will die in silence. Faith without courage will wither in the shadows. But when courage rises, truth becomes a light, faith becomes a fire, and the will becomes unstoppable. I felt this so strongly as the revelation unfolded. The battle with negativity is fierce, but courage is the weapon that cuts through it. Negativity says, you will fall again. Courage answers, even if I fall, I will rise again. Negativity says, you are alone. Courage declares, I am never alone, for God is with me. Negativity says, your voice does not matter. Courage proclaims, if I have breath, I will speak, and heaven will stand with me. This is the call to courage, and it is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who are willing to trust that God's strength is made perfect in their weakness. Do you know why courage is so powerful? Because it is contagious. One act of courage can set others free. One voice that refuses to be silenced can awaken hundreds. One life that stands in the face of fear can break chains for generations to come. And this is why the enemy fights so hard to fill you with negativity. Because if you ever rise in courage, if you ever decide to take that step, if you ever dare to live unafraid, you will shake more than just your own life. You will shake the world around you. I must be honest, courage does not come without a price. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you approval. It may cost you friends. It may cost you opportunities. But what is the alternative? To surrender to fear, to bow to despair, to waste your will on silence and regret. That is the heavier price. That is the slow death of a soul that was created for more. Courage costs, yes, but it also gives. It gives life. It gives freedom. It gives joy that fear can never offer. And in the end, courage is not only worth it, it is necessary. I think of the moments when courage has turned the tide in history, but I also think of the unseen moments, the quiet ones. The mother who chooses courage when despair tells her to give up. The young man who chooses courage when the world tells him he will never rise. The woman who chooses courage when her past screams that she is unworthy. These moments may not make headlines, but they make heaven rejoice. For each act of courage is a declaration. I will not bow to the negative. I will not surrender my will to fear. I will stand in faith. I will live as God has called me to live. And so the call to courage is not just for leaders or voices with platforms. It is for you. Right now, where you are. It is for the battle inside your mind, for the choices you make when no one is watching, for the steps you take when no one is cheering. That is where true courage is forged. That is where destiny is decided. When I prayed, I felt God saying, tell them they are stronger than they know. Tell them my spirit in them is greater than the fear around them. Tell them that courage is not something they have to manufacture. It is something they must surrender to, because when you give me your weakness, I give you my strength. When you yield your will to me, I breathe courage into you that no force of darkness can break. So I stand here and I say to you, do not wait for the feeling of courage to come. Choose it. Take the step. Speak the word. Stand your ground. Because courage is not a feeling. It is a decision. And when you decide, heaven moves with you. The call to courage is the call of this hour. It is the call that separates those who are broken by fear from those who rise above it. It is the call that determines whether negativity will have the last word or whether God's truth will prevail through your life. Answer it, rise to it, and let your courage be the trumpet that declares to the world that you will not bow, you will not break, you will not surrender. That is the call to courage. And it is calling you now. The prophetic warning does not come to comfort. It does not come to flatter. It does not come to tell us what we want to hear. It comes like a trumpet blast, like a fire that cannot be contained, like a storm that shakes the ground beneath us. And it is given because God is merciful. He warns because He loves. He reveals because he desires no one to be destroyed by the lies of darkness. And what he showed me carried the weight of warning. A warning about what happens when the will is surrendered to the negative, when hearts bow down to fear, when minds are consumed by despair, when souls are lulled into silence by lies. It is easy to dismiss negativity as if it were just a passing mood, something harmless, something natural. But no, God made it clear to me, when you let negativity take root, when you allow it to guide your decisions, you are no longer just wrestling with feelings. You are aligning with destruction. The enemy thrives on the surrender of your will. He cannot create, he cannot bring life, he cannot give purpose. He can only twist, weaken, and destroy. And negativity is one of his sharpest tools. It begins as a whisper, but grows into a chain. It begins as a thought, but becomes a prison. And if you do not resist it, if you do not rise against it, it will shape your destiny into something God never intended. The warning is clear. You cannot feed on despair and expect life to flourish. You cannot bow to fear and expect courage to rise. You cannot let bitterness rule your heart and still hope for peace. What you surrender to will rule you. If you surrender to the negative, you will reap destruction. If you surrender to God, you will reap life. The difference between these two paths is not small. It is the difference between bondage and freedom, between light and darkness, between life and death. I felt the urgency of this warning in my spirit. Too many are asleep. Too many think they can toy with the negative, play with the lies, let bitterness sit in their hearts, and it will not matter. But it matters more than they know. For the longer you let negativity stay, the deeper its roots grow. And the deeper the roots, the harder the chains become. God is calling his people to wake up, to recognize the danger, to see that what feels like a small shadow today can become a consuming night tomorrow if you allow it. But here is the mercy within the warning. The moment you choose to resist, the moment you decide to stand, the chains can break, the darkness can flee, the lies can lose their grip. You are not condemned to live under negativity forever. The prophetic warning comes not to destroy you, but to give you the chance to choose life. And that is the decision before you now. There is also a warning for this generation, for entire nations. A people who surrender their will to fear and despair will crumble. A culture that chooses bitterness and anger over truth and grace will collapse under its own weight. A generation that lives under negativity will lose its vision, its hope, its destiny. But if even a remnant, even a few, rise with courage, align their will with God, and refuse to surrender, then light can pierce through the darkness and hope can be restored. The prophetic warning is not something to ignore. It is a line drawn in the sand. It says, choose this day whom you will serve. Will you bow to the negative or will you bow to God? Will you let fear dictate your steps or will you walk by faith? Will you let despair silence you or will you lift your voice in courage? The choice is urgent because the cost is real. I trembled as I felt this truth. Many will miss their calling, not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked opportunity, but because they surrendered to negativity. They believed the lie that they were not enough. They let fear stop them. They let doubt silence them. and their destiny was left unfulfilled. Do not let that be your story. Do not let the whispers of darkness steal what God has written for your life. The prophetic warning is a gift. It is God shouting into the storm of your heart, wake up. Do not surrender. Do not waste your will on lies. Do not forfeit your destiny. Rise, resist, and return to me. So hear it now. Take it seriously. This is not a time to play with shadows. This is not a time to linger in despair. This is the time to decide, to fight, to surrender your will not to negativity, but to the one who gives life. For if you heed the warning, you will find mercy. If you ignore it, the chains will only grow heavier. The time is now. The choice is yours. The warning has been given. Hopeful victory is not the dream of a child. It is not a fantasy we tell ourselves so we can sleep through the night. It is the destiny of every soul that chooses to surrender their will to God rather than to despair. When the storm is raging, when the night is long, when every voice of negativity screams that you are finished, that is the very place where victory is waiting to be born. And this victory is not weak, not fragile, not uncertain. It is a victory that carries the power of eternity because it is not grounded in your strength, but in His. I felt this burning in me. The story does not end with the warning, it ends with the promise. The warning tells us the cost of bowing to the negative, but the promise reveals the glory of rising above it. And that glory is greater than the pain, greater than the fear, greater than the failures of your past. Hopeful victory is when the voice of despair is silenced, when the chains of bitterness are shattered, when the weight of fear is lifted, and you realize that the storm that tried to destroy you has become the very place where God revealed His power. So many walk through life thinking victory means the absence of struggle. They think victory means no more battles, no more pain, no more nights of tears. But that is not the truth. Hopeful victory does not come by escaping the storm, but by standing in it and finding that it cannot break you. It does not come by avoiding the fire, but by walking through it and discovering you are not consumed. It does not come by pretending the negativity is gone, but by refusing to let it rule you. Victory is not the absence of the fight. It is the outcome of choosing to stand with God in the middle of it. And when that choice is made, when your will aligns with His, everything changes. The lies lose their grip. The fear loses its voice. The despair loses its weight. You may still feel the winds, but they no longer control your steps. You may still hear the whispers, but they no longer decide your destiny. You may still stumble, but you rise again stronger than before. This is the shocking truth. Negativity does not have the power to end your story unless you give it permission. But when you surrender to God, when you cling to hope, when you choose faith over fear, then nothing, absolutely nothing, can stop the victory that He has prepared for you. I think of those who have walked through valleys so dark, they thought they would never see the light again. And yet they rise, they live, they testify, they shine brighter than before. That is victory. I think of the broken who thought their story was over, only to find that their scars became the very testimony that set others free. That is victory. I think of the voices silenced by fear who one day found the courage to speak and their words shook nations. That is victory. And this same victory is not just for the few. It is for you. Right where you are, in your struggle, in your doubts, in your pain, the seed of victory is waiting. And what makes it hopeful is this: it is not yet complete. You may feel weak now, but strength is coming. You may feel defeated now, but triumph is on the horizon. You may feel broken now, but healing is already being written into your story. Hopeful victory does not deny the present struggle, but it proclaims the future breakthrough. It tells you that your tears will not last forever, that your chains are not permanent, that your darkness is not endless. It declares that the one who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. This is why the enemy fights you so hard, because if you ever realize how close victory truly is, if you ever recognize that your will surrendered to God makes you unstoppable, then you will rise, and when you rise, others will rise with you. Your victory is not only for you. It is for your family, for your children, for those who watch your life from a distance and find courage in your endurance. Every battle you win breaks chains for someone else. Every time you refuse to bow to negativity, the ripple of your faith spreads further than you know. So do not give up. Do not bow. Do not believe the lie that this is the end. It is not the end. It is the turning point. The storm that was meant to crush you will become the wind that lifts you. The fire that was meant to consume you will refine you into pure gold. The darkness that tried to silence you will become the backdrop against which your light shines even brighter. That is hopeful victory. It is the assurance that God's word is greater than the enemy's lies, that his promises are stronger than your fears, that his hand will not let you go. So rise. Rise in faith. Rise in courage. Rise in hope. For the victory is not far away. It is here, it is now, it is already written. And when you surrender your will to him, when you choose to believe, you will find that the story ends not in despair, but in triumph. That is what God showed me. That is the victory waiting for you.